Welcome to today's conversation, and it's an absolute delight to finally welcome Christoph Müller onto the channel. Christoph is someone I've been speaking to for a number of months now, and I think what he's doing is extraordinary. It's providing the kind of silicon curtain to a German-speaking world, and as we've seen with the developments in the US, the need for Europe to take a lead on security, this could not come at a better time. And I'm so glad that Christoph has been thinking about doing this for a number of months and already been working on starting to build up his channel. Now, the need for this is absolutely critical. So welcome to Silicon Curtain, Christoph.
Hello, Jonathan. I'm really, really pleased and thrilled having this conversation with you now. Absolutely.
Well, it's absolutely marvelous, and there's so many different angles to tackle. You've been extremely pro-Ukrainian for some time, and since the start of full-scale war, you've been able to see right from wrong and believe that Germany should play a leading role in the defense and victory of Ukraine. You're also involved in music. We'll come to the music sort of secondary, and we'll hit the politics first. But let's start with your motivations for wanting Ukraine to succeed, because I know Scholz got quite a bashing. When you look at the numbers, Germany's actually not done that badly. In fact, Germany is the biggest contributor of aid to Ukraine. I know tourists, everyone gets really hung up on tourists, and that would have been nice. But Germany's building armaments factories. Rheinmetall is behind the scenes doing extraordinary things to rearm Ukraine, and the amount of aid, the amount of support, and indeed the way Germany has sort of pushed itself forward. It took quite an effort to get over, post-World War II reluctance to be, using and wielding military power, especially against Russia. So we've seen Germany come a long way. What's your motivation, and what are your thoughts on all of that?
Oh, it's a big number of things you have just mentioned, Jonathan. So my motivation to act as a pro-Ukrainian man is just because I'm a human being who has feelings and who has a sense of justice, and it's just absolutely unfair that a brave and brilliant country and people, I mean, all people don't deserve that what happens right now to Ukraine, and not right now, already since 3 years, and not since 3 years, already since 11 years, and that's my motivation is because I stumbled into Ukraine in the Ukrainian topic just because I fell in love with a Ukrainian woman. I'm married to my beautiful wife I'm married since 22 years, and I know really a lot about Ukraine already. And I was so astonished what my wife told me when we just met. She said, it's always the same. It's not only since 11 years. It's not since 20. It's since hundreds of years. Since 200 years of years. It's always the same. The Russians will suppress us and try to eliminate us and extinguish our culture. It's not possible. They will never succeed. They have no chance. We are brave. We will fight, and they cannot suppress us. They cannot extinguish our culture. That was what she was telling me, and I thought, it's not. When I got married, as I said, 22 years ago, I thought that's not fair. Now it must stop this. It's not possible that the Ukrainian people will get erased again from the map, this country. So I thought I thought that already 22 years ago. Now it should stop, and that's why my motivation is really strong. And it's not only my motivation. There are hundreds of thousands of millions of people who think like that, and the Russians should not succeed this time once again. Impossible.
And my first conversation with Serhiy this is another mutual connection we've got now, and I think it's important. It's important to unite people who are vocal in support of Ukraine and who understand, let's say, politics in German, the complicated nuances of German politics. But one of the things we first discussed is that there is a tremendous amount of war guilt, but it's directed in a fairly clunky way, let's say, towards Russia as a whole. Whereas looking at the facts, it's Belarus and Ukraine that suffered as a percentage of their population, higher casualties, and indeed the destruction of the cities was so much more intense on the territory of Belarus and Ukraine. And yet, since independence, you've got this sort of rather warped sense of where this guilt should be projected. And really, analysis of it should mean that Ukraine gets perhaps a lot more sympathy than it does. Is that a fair statement, or is there quite a lot of nuance behind this?
Sympathy they got, but it's, as you said, it's warped. There is in the German, and not only, I guess, in the German knowledge, also in the European and the American knowledge, there is a lot of distorted things, and it's always because of a lack of information the people have, and they don't know. We in Germany, for example, there was a big majority of people who thought, yeah, it's Russia, and Russia suffered the most, and they equalized Soviet Union and Russia, and they didn't understand that there were other countries in the Soviet Union which are not Russia. And that's why the Russians, they have an easy task to convince the Germans that they are guilty of Second World War, and that's why it's Russia who suffered the most, and that's why the Germans should shut up and don't say anything. And there is a lot of people in Germany from the so-called peace movement, or the peace movement, the real peace movement, but they are captivated by this Russian propaganda, and they say, yes, we are guilty, and that's why they are open for Russian propaganda, which is, and I myself say always, Russian propaganda, whatever comes out of the mouth of Vladimir Putin, is a lie. And I don't like lies, and that's why I don't listen to him. Whatever he says, I don't listen. And that's also what the Ukrainians say. And I wish that the German media would say the same thing, but they always repeat and parrot what the Russian propaganda says, and that's why they are not helping to clarify the situation. And that's why we have this big mess all around here. And that's why the Russians can go on.
It's extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, there are a couple of people who appear on DW, which I quite appreciate, and some of the journalists there have a bit more context, and I say ask, reasonably good questions. But what jars is you'll then see an interview where you think, oh my goodness, where's this coming from, or where's this piece of normalization coming from, or the correspondent will be in Ukraine, but saying something that just jars and doesn't feel like it has any connection to the sort of context. France 24 occasionally, although they do some good stuff. I find as well the BBC is really not always that well informed, even when they cover the topic. So this maybe is not just a German problem. This is maybe a mainstream problem of lack of context, lack of knowledge, lack of experience amongst some journalists, and it makes it very easy for propaganda narratives to frame the the direction of the questions.
Yeah, absolutely. We miss to understand that the war, what Russia makes against Ukraine and against the Western world, that this war, I mention now the Western world, but we think here in Germany it's still the war against Ukraine, and they only think in military categories. But the Russians see it absolutely clearly, not only on military topics, it's also on information topics, and the propaganda machine is the same or maybe more important even than the military one. And that's how we have to get conscious on that, and that's why we help with our YouTube channels on that. Yeah.
Well, this is extraordinarily important. Of course, one of your efforts is to try and reach a much bigger German-speaking audience. But let's turn to politics, because now is, this might sound sort of cynical. It's very important to have these conversations now when German politics is changing so dramatically. But at the same time, when something like this is in the news, it's a great opportunity to grow your channel, because there's huge engagement with these topics. So this is the perfect kind of time to talk. What is your impression? Because we're hearing a lot of strong words from Merz, who is supposedly the winner of the election. But I understand from my sources there's more complexity behind it, because you might have to end up with a grand coalition that may actually find it difficult to make decisions and do things quickly. So on the one hand, you have this incredibly strong rhetoric. We all know as well that rhetoric is one thing and actions are another. I'll just throw in a little kind of verbal grenade in here. Macron, since his rapid change of mind that happened, I think, in the winter of 23, coincidentally, shortly after I'd been to Paris and did an event, his French foreign policy changed significantly towards Russia and got harsher. On the one hand, you've got the rhetoric, and then you've got the reality, which is that France, at this point in time right now, is paying more money for Russian LNG than it is giving in aid to Ukraine. So you've got the rhetoric and you've got the reality. How do we translate that into the German arena?
Yeah, it's kind of the same. In Germany, there's also this money issue always more important than the political things, and that's what they don't understand. I don't have it right here. There's a brilliant book. It's called Nord Stream, which came out. And that shows exactly how the SPD and the Schröder connection, the so-called Moscow connection, was involved, and how the Germans, they really supported the Russian war machine with money coming out from Russian gas. And that was really difficult. When the war started, then they were still paying lots of big money chunks just to because they could not get rid of that. So. But I'm so glad now that the politics now has a chance to change, because you said it's a grand coalition. It's good that we have now only two parties who would become the government, which will be the CDU and the SPD. The SPD, I was reluctant, but I think those main figures who are in the Moscow connection, they get now eliminated, and I'm also optimistic that the SPD has a good view on that too. And I also like the rhetorics what Friedrich Merz did. But yeah, let's see it. But they understand also that now they have to make action. Making only words doesn't make the thing better. It's getting bad otherwise.
And of course, Scholz has got a really bad press, and he certainly seems to have certain areas of weakness, let's say. But on the other hand, Germany has provided more aid than any other European country, including the UK. And along with Denmark, it has perhaps taken some of the most significant steps, which don't get reported that much, and that is actually investing in the Ukrainian defense industry. Rheinmetall is building huge facilities in Ukraine, and it's incredibly far-sighted, I think. The idea is that, if you're going to build these in Europe, it's going to be slow and bureaucratic. You're going to get resistance, and there's regulation, and there's this, that, and the other. They've recognized that you can do things far faster in Ukraine. And you have a talent pool of engineers there, and the unit cost is going to be a lot lower. And by investing in Ukraine, you're already building European defense. So whereas Merz is talking about, this, and it's the first time we're hearing this language, which is a European defense architecture with Ukraine at its center, it seems that Germany has already been taking some of these steps over the last couple of years, which I think is fascinating. Of course, Denmark is doing the same, but that's, their reason is vision. But also they're a small country, and their money translates and goes a lot further if it's spent in Ukraine than if it's spent in Denmark.
For me, they are still too slow. They always think they have a lot of a big amount of time, but they don't have. And I think now with Trump, when Donald Trump makes this big, I don't know how to say this in English now, the big. The big cut, when the Europeans now understand completely, now we have to make actions, and that's why I have some hope that this time it will go fast. As you say, Rheinmetall, they are they are perfect. They are doing what they can, but the political will in Germany must really change now, and not only the Germans but the Europeans too. I never understood why the Europeans were they were sometimes better in words, but they were not good in actions. But we gave a lot, but we did not give enough. We have to give everything to Ukraine that they will win this war before it will become the World War III. And what I'm really afraid of is now those steps about peace talks, so-called peace talks. This should never happen, because this word peace is captured in the wrong way.
It definitely is. And I know tourist gets the big focus, but we have to think back to the delays in providing Leopards, the main battle tanks. It took month after month after month of huge public pressure and activist pressure to get that moving. And always there was this fear, if we take this step, it's this extraordinary red line and Russia's going to do this, that, and the other. Yeah. Guess what? Those red lines just whistle past with no consequences. And you realize that Russia is a kind of paper tiger, and those threats were just illusory. They just move the boundary on to the next thing, the next munition. Oh, yeah, well, you've done that. Okay, but definitely don't do this over here.
But what do you think about the step of Macron, that he's talking now to Donald Trump about things? What do you think about that? Is it useful that anybody talks with Donald Trump, or can he help?
I think the way Macron did it is useful, because he sat there and he fact-checked Donald Trump to his face in the heart of Washington.
Yes.
I actually think that is incredibly important at this time, because so many people, it's the emperor's new clothes. So many people are in the crowd, literally kowtowing, thinking that the best approach is to appease this capricious, gangster toddler who's taken over the world's most powerful nation. And they're thinking, okay, don't upset him. Whatever you do, don't upset him. No, this is the wrong approach, I think, because he is going to betray you anyway. He is going to slight you anyway. He is going to denigrate you. And if you appease him, if you repeat his lies back and become complicit in those lies, he will have zero respect, and he will know that he owns you. And you will no longer have any traction with him. I think the first step to dealing with Donald Trump is to say no, with all due respect and in the politest possible terms. This is the reality, not what you've just said over there. And you just have to be prepared to take the consequences of that. This is the only way we're going to start to deal with Trump, is to call out the lies, push back on the lies, and unfortunately play hardball with him. Okay, you're going to put tariffs on this and this. Okay, well, we're going to put tariffs on that, that, and that. Or how about we remove all your American bases from Europe? Would you like that? You have to come back at him as hard as he comes at you. That'll make him stop and think. His advisors will then be like, actually, maybe this isn't the best move, because we need these things over here.
Do you think there are any advisors who listens to them? Or?
I think he doesn't when he doesn't get any pushback. If he comes up with an absolutely mad suggestion, and everyone goes, oh, well, like Greenland. There are so many analysts who are saying, well, this is really a terrible way to put it. But, actually, we do have a problem, and there is a geopolitical problem, and Greenland is crucial to it. So maybe he has a point. This is appeasement of the first order, and it does not work, because he then thinks, okay, this was a great idea. Let's move forward. When he gets resistance and pushback and doesn't get his own way, he has to recalibrate his strategy. At that point, he may well seek further input from advisors, but at the very least, it will make him stop and think, I didn't get my own way. Right, I'm going to have to, if I'm going to get my own way, I have to reformulate it. I have to come back at it in a different way. And he'll use bluster and he'll use threat. These are all negotiation tactics for him. But if you cave in the first instant, you're not going to get any of his respect. You're not going to get any of his attention. You're not even going to irritate him. You're going to be invisible to him. So I think with Trump, getting in his way and irritating him is the first step to maybe getting a result.
Yeah, this is about talking, and but we Germans, we are really fixed on always talking. With actions, we are not so good sometimes, but talking is our big strength. And that's also about Vladimir Putin, the Russian dictator who has understood this perfectly, talking. And now Trump is talking with Putin. May I ask you, now I am asking you, what you think, is talking with Putin necessary, or should we just block him with actions?
Talking with Putin, that's a different one. I mean, Trump certainly admires, I think, dictators, and he admires autocrats. And I think he studies their methods to an extent, as far as he can understand them. He studies their methods and actions. And I think some of what he's doing is trying to sort of be like Kim Jong-un, be like Putin and Xi, because, he wants to play with the big boys, and this is how they behave, right? So I need to do the same, to be in that gang, as it were. Talking with Putin is different because he's a trained KGB officer. He is a trained psychological manipulator.
Absolutely.
He is a psychopathic thug, a professional psychopathic thug, grafted onto a 90s Russian mafiosi. So he's an extremely dangerous and intelligent character. He's not intelligent in an innovative way, in a creative way. He doesn't have any of those qualities. And his version of history is extremely warped, imperialistic, and wrong in most respects. But he is a smart manipulator of people, and his key skill is to give people the impression that he's listened to them and that he agrees with them and that he's similar to them.
Yeah,
He's none of these things. He's absolutely none of these things.
Yeah.
So talking to him is not going to get a result. Now, the strategy, and this is, Ukrainians understand this, is like, they say, how do you deal with a gopnik? How do you make a gopnik go away? And for anyone who doesn't know, a gopnik is like a petty gangster, a street thug. You punch him in the face until he leaves you alone. That's it.
That's it. Don't talk with those guys.
Don't talk. No.
Don't talk. And that's always the big mistake, and that's what they have never understood in Germany, not, and in America maybe also absolutely not. And when I see Trump talking with Putin or announcing a talk with Putin, and by the way, the foreign so-called minister, secretary of Putin, Lavrov, same thing.
Same thing. Yeah, he's it's nice cop and nasty cop, and he'll I mean, Putin has an interesting technique, which is, he'll do something awful, such as invade Crimea with little green men, and then all his minions will spin lies and fantasies and stories and this and that and the other, and then after a period of time, Putin will come in and just say, yeah, of course we did it, and rather than condemning, and people go like, oh, look at, he actually, he tells the truth sometimes. And he does. Occasionally, he's sort of candid in that way, but it's another manipulative technique. It's another manipulative technique. You've been set up to think, right, it's all a lie. And then, goodness, you're struck with sort of shards of truth mixed in with a lie, like broken glass in a cake. And that is sort of Putin's sort of strategy there. And he is eloquent. You listen to him in Russian, he is verbally quite fluent and eloquent, but he also has a vast team that help make him look that way. They script write stuff to the nth degree. They train him and tutor him and support him. It's all a sort of, crafted image. So if you're going to talk to him, you're going to fall into that trap. You're going to fall into this PR machine, or this political spin machine that he's created. Has Trump got that machine? Well, he could if he wants. I just don't think he has the patience to build such a machine, because for him, I think his key skill is his own, spaghetti against the wall marketing technique, just throwing out a million ideas and see what kind of sticks. That sort of slightly chaotic approach, with minimal planning, minimal context, very low level of professionalism, is that going to work with Putin? No. I mean, Kamala Harris said that Putin's going to absolutely eat him for lunch. And that's exactly what we're seeing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings me really to the point that talking with, in the moment, the USA are also gone. They are out. I don't know how to deal with them. Jake Bro has some recipes maybe, but as an American, but the Europeans, they have to be fixed on themselves now. They have to really wake up very fast now and understand that those things have to stop, and they cannot be stopped by talking. We have to make those measures, and we have to clarify our compass and say that is north and that is south, and we have to go to that direction and nowhere else. And the compass in Germany and maybe in the whole Europe and is distorted, and that's why now we have the chance to recalibrate that. And I was saying yesterday on the rally that we have to follow the Ukrainians, what they say. This is important. And Zelenskyy, by the way, he gave a very clear speech on the Munich Security Conference. The Ukrainians could be the rescue of Europe, and we have to understand this.
I think this is going back to Mertz's phrase there. This is why I think it's important, because he's not just saying like, yeah, Germany's going to solve all these problems, etc. I think it's a recognition that Ukraine is actually the pivot point, is the absolute key to
Absolutely.
European security. Now, it's ironic, I in the first months of the war, I made this point, and I suggested to my speakers that you would get extreme resistance from Germany and France to arm Ukraine for victory, because yes, you've got, bureaucratic issues and hurdles. You've got all the usual excuses. But there's also maybe an understanding that once you empower Ukraine to victory, the center of European military strategy, expertise, technology, and power will shift decisively to the east, to Ukraine and Poland.
Yeah.
And I kind of stand by that idea, even though the speakers I spoke to were like, oh, horrified by it, horrified. Oh, God, no, that's not how we work. That's not how things work. No, that thought couldn't be further from. I'm like, well, I'm really not so sure. Now, I think that is almost vindicated, because Ukraine finally is being seen as that key to European security. The sort of hubris that prevented people from seeing it before, or even the fear of that transition of power, that's been overcome by the clear and present danger of no longer having the US umbrella. And this is this kind of curious irony, is it? That there's this extreme sort of almost sort of hubris and arrogance that we actually saw implied in the actions of Europeans, and to an extent the British as well. That's only possible if you've got like Big Brother, Big Brother US with a giant stick protecting you. Then you can play all these little games and like, who are the Ukrainians really? I mean, and now that stick's been taken away, and this cold, harsh light of reality means like, oh my God, we need Ukraine to survive.
Yeah, absolutely. And we must keep Ukraine alive. Otherwise, we will die ourselves. If we get through to our politicians with this message, then there's a lot is won. We have the chance now to do it. I realize a lot of times that the politicians, when they are really in the cold wind, and they grow over themselves. They understand all of a sudden what to do. That's the point of hope here.
It is, and it took.
I'm pretty hopeful. Yeah. I'm pretty hopeful. We had really I was so happy of the last elections that this Trojan horse of Vladimir Putin, not the AfD, unfortunately, they are in Germany, alternative for Germany, but there is a second Trojan horse from Putin, which is called Sarah Wagenknecht, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht, BSW. Have you heard about that? Probably not. I'm not sure. Oh, I cannot hear you now, Jonathan. I can't hear you. What's going? You are muted. You're muted, unfortunately.
There we go. I had too many windows open. I couldn't get back to it. That's right. I'll cut that bit out as well. No, I haven't. Is that the left-leaning kind of puppet party as opposed to the right-leaning one? Or who are they?
Absolutely. We had the left-leaning party, which is called Die Linke, the lefts. And Sarah Wagenknecht, she looks like Rosa Luxemburg, and she was one main figure of this party, and they left the party last year. They just quit, and then they formed their own party, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. And all of a sudden, this thing appeared, and it became big, and it had 6, 7, 8%, 10%, Bündnis Sarah Wagenknecht. And I was shocked. So many people in Germany, they say, yeah, it's a good left thing on peace. And she always writes peace on her wallpapers. Peace. We need peace in Germany. In peace. This is over peace. Peace is war. This is the twisted kind of peace. Means capitulation for Ukraine all the time. And then she said, we cannot sell and pump weapons into Ukraine. No, don't pump weapons. So and there's so many peace people in Germany, and pacifists and left pacifists and also right pacifists. They say peace is so important and weapons are so bad, and Ukraine is full of weapons and they are Nazis. They parrot the Russian propaganda. And so this Wagenknecht was really powerful. And thanks God, 5 months ago or 10 months ago, I don't know, since the re-election, it came clear that there would be new elections in Germany. People started to understand that Wagenknecht is kind of a fake party, and they are pro-Russian and Russia is bad, and that's why something's wrong with this party. And thanks God, Jonathan, it's so incredible. This party got under the 5% hurdle just a tiny fraction, 0.03% under the 5% hurdle.
Because if they were in there, that's another, complication to deal with.
Absolutely. They would be in parliament, and they would spill their lies. So I was really happy that they did not come into the parliament, and also the FDP didn't come over the 5% hurdle, the Free Democratic Party. So we have only 2 main parties who could make the government now. So the AfD is the second strongest force in Germany, which is horrible. But the CDU won, Friedrich Merz, and SPD was on place number 3, and so they could make a...
Could you help explain to me this? Because looking at the map, it seems that they've grown dramatically in the last couple of years from, having some sort of heartlands of support. They've now moved that out.
Yeah.
But it seems to very geographically exactly cover the territory of East Germany, with almost no seats won, or no seats actually won in West Germany. This seems extraordinary. 30 years into this bold experiment of reunification, it seems that, to my mind, the idea of democratic culture has not quite hasn't quite taken roots, or at least those roots are shallow, and possibly the benefits of sort of free capitalist system have also not quite been experienced by these. But I'm trying to explain it with probably very badly. What's your view? Why is the AfD really cut through in these areas that used to be occupied and, I would say, brainwashed over decades by the Soviet Union?
Yeah, that is really a mystical thing. I never thought that this would happen. And exactly, it's the map of the GDR, the old Soviet occupied German Democratic so-called Republic. And those people there in the East, I have relatives there, cousins, and I have two cousins I have three cousins, and one is clearer minded, and two of them they voted for AfD, and they are completely brainwashed also. And what they say is that they have been everything has been taken away from them all the time. They are in the victim role. During the GDR, they have been the victims of the Soviets, and now, since the reunification, they are again the victims of the capitalists from West Germany who came and bought cheap all the rest of their companies and so on. They don't see that we have built their streets, and when you go there, when you travel there, it looks perfect, fantastic houses, nice streets, everything is nice, but they are They are not satisfied because their countryside got empty. People moved away to the West because they could earn more money there. So they have the feeling of being victims once again. And they are kind of open for the Soviet propaganda because they are calibrated into listening to what the big brother says, Soviet Union from them. It's Russia. They are friends of Russia. So they are more open for that, and that's why this Russian propaganda can come more easy into their minds than into the Western part. But Russian propaganda also comes into the Western parts now, and then those lies about refugees which come and they are blown up, and the problem of migration and refugees is really, really big there. This is crazy.
And do these areas have high levels of refugees, or
no, they don't? They
don't actually. So they're in contrast to the West.
There's a small number of refugees there, but they think there is a big number of refugees. And sometimes, if there is a refugee camp, it happens sometimes that Nazis. There exist also Nazis, and they burn houses and people are killed, and that is horrible. And then it's everywhere in the news, and so. So I see
because Germany's extremely multicultural. Is that more Absolutely. The case for the Western part? I mean, I just traveled through via Göttingen and Aachen and places, and of course, huge sort of Turkish, Syrian, Middle Eastern populations. It's extraordinary. But is that more of a Western German phenomenon than Eastern?
I think so. I think in the Eastern part, the refugees or other cultures, they don't like them there. They are more rightist, and that's why people, I think, it's not so easy to talk in general, but I think the multicultural thing is more in the Western part, because when Germany has been rebuilt after the Second World War, we had a lot of Turkish immigrants to build up our industry also. So Cologne, for example, Ford, the General Motors, Ford, so many Turks here. And that, of course, leads also to some problems. So good Turks we have, but they are Muslims, and that's why there is sometimes, we are multicultural. And if you exaggerate with things like that, but you have also in England a lot of Pakistani people, and you have also migrant problems, don't you?
This issue is certainly weaponized, and there are issues with integration. I think, I was speaking to friends of ours in Germany who were going through the tests you need to pass, including the language tests you need to pass in order to get citizenship. And actually the bar is set incredibly high. And they were, this particular person was actually going through this course herself because she's a non-German native going through this sort of integration process. And she said the linguistic bar is set extremely highly. You have to go to, if you're not a natural linguist, you have to go to classes for even several years to be able to pass it. And I think these are kind of things which I think are absolutely necessary, because if you have people in your country who do not, even as a low bar, speak the language and cannot watch materials or engage in cultural activities, whether it be films, television, or anything else, then that is divisive, and I'm gonna just put that out there. It's divisive to have people who are completely separate and divorced from the culture of the language they live in. And when I mean culture, I mean it in that sort of diverse sense, because not knowing English is a barrier to not just knowing traditional English culture, but all the other cultures that exist on the island, and all the other ethnicities that are bringing something to the table. So I think the topic of integration has been dodged by politicians because they don't want to be thought of as racist, because it's complicated, because it requires investment, and I think that has caused tremendous problems, actually.
Yeah, and this exactly the same thing in Germany, and this migration topic has been exploited by the AfD excessively, and it pushes the established parties in front of them. And then now during this election campaign, it was all about migration, migration, migration. That was the only thing they were talking about. Sometimes they were talking about other inner political things, but they were almost never talking about Ukraine. Not
That's extraordinary.
This is crazy. This topic was, from my point of view, really excluded from the agenda, and sometimes they were talking about it in the talk shows. But this is horrible.
But this is when you want to generate a puppet party, a populist puppet party, that balloons very rapidly, then you have to choose issues which are highly emotive, and they relate to identity rather than the complexities of policy. And we see the same in the UK with Reform, in a party that's come from absolutely nowhere to be Reform. It's called Reform, and it's run by Nigel Farage, who
this one I know.
Let's not get sued by
that was the Brexit guy, right? Yeah. One of those.
He's the Brexit guy, yeah. He's the guy who's been agitating for many, many years.
And he loves Putin, of course.
He admires Putin. He knows that Putin is even less popular here than he is in Germany and the US. There's zero support for Putin, and there's very little, if any, there's no support for Russia and its actions. I think Britain is one of the least the most clear-sighted on this issue, at least. You go to a pub, you won't find anyone who's like, peace, and lay down in front of, the right. It's like, no, it's wrong. We know what it's like to fight alone before the US came into the Second World War. We know what tyranny looks like. We know what it smells like. And this is it. There's none of this kind of debate in Britain. So Farage knows that he can't use that topic. He can't praise Putin, but he has on a number of occasions.
That's interesting.
And he's very measured in the criticism he makes of Putin. But he knows that he has to say something. But there are an unusual number of people in his party who could be described as pro-Russian. There are some who are against the war, interestingly, but there's a much higher percentage. So his party has all the characteristics of I would call it a puppet party, created to balloon up very quickly, to latch on to simplistic populist issues. And he's been compelled by Brexit to go through these sort of generations of different parties. It means the party isn't really that important. It's him as a vehicle of destabilization and an agent of chaos. The trouble is people can't see it because he talks and he addresses issues which mainstream politicians have ducked and avoided for many years. He talks about these issues in an extremely simplistic manner. So, of course, it's superficially attractive. And because he is, I would say, a natural authoritarian, I have, before people go like, oh, were you saying this? I've spoken to people who've worked with him. And he's not a team player. Even people who are very close and have worked with him for years and decades will say, yeah, he doesn't really, get on with other people and have a dialogue with them.
Yeah, but isn't it astonishing that people like that they they get votes. There
Yes.
are people who are voting for them. And that
He
is,
absolutely is. I mean, at school, he taught his friends SS marching songs, and his actual school report, his teacher basically wrote in his school report, "This guy is a complete Nazi." I mean, quite literally.
wow,
Um, so yeah, I mean, people could dig a little bit and you
but
know,
but but
not.
also but also in Germany, this word Nazi it's a no-no word. But the AfD, for example, 4 years ago, it was still small, and when it came up, it was exactly, by the way, in 2014 when it came up, when the Crimea was annexed. That was the time when AfD was invented and created, and guess who has his fingers there? We both know. But the rest of the Germans didn't care about that. All the AfD is there, and it was a shame to talk about AfD, and they were really weird. And after the years, and now you can say, I elected for AfD, and so, okay, you are 20% of the Germans voted for AfD. You're one of those five who, okay, it's no longer time a no-no word. And it reminds me really of 1933 when Adolf Hitler's NSDAP was all of a sudden established, and that's really dangerous.
Yes, yes, it absolutely is, and even more extreme because you couldn't get away with this in Germany, but we saw Steve Bannon and we saw Elon Musk give a fascist salute.
Absolutely.
I mean, this is sort of gaslighting and delusion on an extraordinary kind of scale here. But all the spider tentacles, as it were, I've mixed my metaphors there, all the octopus
I
tentacles,
like them.
they all ladder back to Russian interference and
Absolutely.
psychological operations.
He
All
is
of them.
he's the spider in the net, Vladimir Putin, and that's why he has to be cut off and he has not to be talked of. We are clear about that.
We just chop the tentacles and we just keep chopping because they'll try to regrow them. And that is the game we're playing here. But we were perhaps not quite tuned into that game. I think people should watch that James Bond film a little bit more because the world has moved decisively to James Bond looking less like a ridiculous fantasy to being quite realistic. I mean, you look at the Moonraker guy. You've got a guy obsessed with space rockets who turns out to be a secret Nazi and wants to repopulate the world. Oh, hang on a second. That's that's here we go. Hello, Elon.
That's the thing I'm always thinking about. Why aren't the Hollywood producers not able? Why aren't they able to make a movie which is really so powerful and shows just the truth? The people like to watch movies, but they don't like to watch the reality, which
Yeah,
is even
Christoph,
worse than the.
it's because reality is so much more absurd than anything that you could actually put on a film. If you made a film of what's happening now, or even a satirical film of it, people look at it and go, "That's just silly." I mean, that's just silly. That's beyond what could happen. So life has almost made satire redundant, and that was a phrase that was once used about Margaret Thatcher. But of course, Margaret Thatcher was spawned a huge satirical industry because she wasn't mad and she wasn't evil and she wasn't a dictator and you disagree with her policies, but you need something grounded in normality for satire to work. Reality is now so far beyond that. I mean, this is one of the things I think we missed a trick, and I don't know if this is really, the German culture here, but the British political culture from the sort of 17th, 18th century had extremely vicious satire, stuff that wouldn't have been allowed anywhere in Europe because, of course, you had more of more of an sort of authoritarian sort of systems throughout Europe. But British satire from the 18th century is so unbelievably vicious, and it's hilarious and it's incredible. That kind of what we need to relearn those techniques now, I think, to deal with Putin.
That's the point. Yeah, we have to. This is the day for satire, information. I think humor is the biggest weapon against satire, against a dictator like Putin. And then there we are again. It's Volodymyr Zelensky. He is a he is a humorous guy, and he knows exactly. He could be a leader. He could lead us out of this mess.
Out of dark, comedian leaders out of darkness. I think now that's the film right there, isn't it? That's the movie script.
We are in a film, Jonathan.
We are, yes. Yeah, it feels it every day, especially the last week. It definitely feels like we're in a very dark movie that has been scripted by a very sick mind. But it means we need comedy, we need laughter to get us out of there. And this is what I've always attracted me, to Ukraine. And one of Russia's leading writers actually is Ukrainian, is Mikhail Gogol, Gogol, as others will know him.
Absolutely, yeah.
And of course, I'd say, is the soul of Russian literature. He is the humor and the satire that gives so-called Russian literature its life and its humanity. He's not Russian at all. Take that away. He's actually Ukrainian. But that's kind of what we need.
Thanks for mentioning him. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's what we need, and we will get out of this.
So, Christoph, before we go, just a quick advert. You're going to be running an event on Saturday, a panel event, which I'm absolutely delighted to join. Could you tell us a little bit more on that? Because I would strongly, strongly recommend the Silicon Curtain audience to check that out. Okay.
Yeah, on Saturday there will be a recording, a live stream with Ambassador Melnik, Andriy Melnik, the UN ambassador from Ukraine, who is going to talk with me in my channel, Talk for Ukraine. And I ask you, everybody, please switch in and join. Time is up, and it was so great talking to you.
Definitely come back on the channel. I advise anyone watching this, please do subscribe to Christoph's channel. It is, as I say, relatively new. It's a few months old. But
Talk for Ukraine.
Talk for Ukraine, unbelievably important that we have someone who understands the German culture, mindset, political landscape, and can actually do these broadcasts in German as well as English. It's a tremendously valuable role, I think, you're going to be playing in this ecosystem and the resistance to tyranny that is rising in the world. Christoph, thank you for coming on Silicon Curtain.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. Thanks for having me.